I wanted to share my story because basically I am one of those people who, unfortunately for me, kind of had my own journey in and out of Islam. And I lived my life as a Muslim for a good amount of years. And then I left. And I just wanted to share my perspective because um, I think there's a great amount of like ex-Muslim stories where people have left and these people were born into Islam, but there's also a percentage of people and who convert to Islam and actually leave. But the Islamist propaganda is kind of like they like to pretend that so many people convert to Islam and then their lives are so much better. And look, I believe that probably is a case that some people have converted to Islam and they are very happy with their decision and they feel it was the right choice for them. But I wanted to share my story of how I felt that the decision I made was completely wrong. Um, and it did negatively impact my life. I didn't find peace in it and I ended up leaving. And I just want to share my experience really and the reasons why I decided to leave, but also the reasons how I entered into the faith, because that's also important to discuss because not everyone enters into a religion for the right reasons, and it's something that I think should be avoided. So I'll quickly document my story and I will try my hardest to um explain kind of what happened to me and whatnot. So long story short, I grew up Catholic, and I actually grew up in a really tight-knit Catholic community in London, and I basically didn't really have any other friends of other faiths or family members. Yeah, so it was just everything was just Catholicism. As I said, I went to Catholic schools, and then when I was like, I think I was 16, I actually left the Catholic school system and I went to just a normal sixth form. And that's the first time I was ever introduced to Islam because before then I just knew about it from like the news, unfortunately. Just like that kind of classic media coverage, especially growing up, in the kind of in the wake of 9/11, really, really kind of colored my view on Islam from that perspective. So I just thought it was something quite scary. And I didn't mix with Muslim people, so I had no idea what it was about. I just thought it was something that was quite controversial. My family had no issues with Islam, and all we knew about, the only time we'd hear about it was like when there was a terrorist attack, which sounds terrible, but that's just how it was. Yeah, so I actually studied religious studies for my A levels, which is like kind of the education you do just before you go to uni in the UK. I ended up taking a class called religious studies, which I thought was religious studies, but it was actually just Islamic studies. I don't know why they just didn't write Islamic studies, but I guess because of the UK curriculum, they had to label it as religious studies. So I ended up in this class, and it was just basically there was only like five non-Muslims in a class of like 30 or 30 students. And to be honest, I had never experienced the Muslim community before, and it struck me as being absolutely supportive, um, just so together. Like they just had this strong identity. And in my case, it's quite important to note that I grew up in a household where I had a lot of issues. Not that I can really go into them here, but I had a lot of problems growing up. And I had issues around my own identity, and I didn't really have a happy childhood. Um, Definitely didn't have happy teenage years. I mean, my teenage years were really bad for me, like I said, for a multitude of reasons. Um, so I didn't feel like I really belonged with my own family. And as anyone who understands trauma and abuse would know that that's going to create issues around identity and having a stable sense of self. And that definitely happened to me. I had no true sense of self. Discovered when I saw the Muslims in my class, like we would have discussions on things like euthanasia, and they would all have the same opinion. Like nobody had different opinions, which I found really at that age, because I didn't have a lot of knowledge about the world yet. I thought the fact that they all thought the same way and they all had this wonderful like sense of togetherness. Like when we talk about euthanasia in class, they would all just say like it's wrong because Allah says it's wrong. And that was just the genuine sentiment, and there was no wiggle room. Everybody thought the same way. And I was really impressed by that in my young, impressionable mind, because I was used to, in my Catholic school, we had atheists in our class, like, not everyone thought the same way. And all of this was building this really strong profile in my mind that this is like almost like a kind of gigantic family. And it was so attractive to me. Another thing was that I'd always been taught by society that the hijab was like something that they were forced to wear, and like, those typical stereotypical tropes you just think. But then I saw the girls in my class were like, they were like fashionable with their hijab, and they were actually wearing it, and they encouraged each other to wear it. And once again, it was that strong marker of identity that I was so attracted to. My teacher, who actually was a very, very lovely woman, and I would say she was one of the nicest people I ever met. And yes, she was Muslim, and she was, I'd say, a very spiritual Muslim. Like, she was definitely not political at all, but she was very spiritual. And I had not been shown much kindness by people in my life. I had friends that I knew, but from adults, I didn't really have anyone of I could look to. And she was one of the first people who just showed me kindness, and it made such an impression on me. And with Islam, everything good obviously comes from Allah, according to Muslims. So when you meet such a wonderful person, they will attribute that to Islam. When you see the togetherness, when you see the community, they attribute it to Islam. Now, I was too young, I guess, to really understand the multifaceted reasons why somebody is such a nice person. Makes someone a good person is not just one thing. But at that point, I don't think I was old enough to really understand that. So I just went with it. I was like, wow. But being Catholic, I had that problem in me that I was like, hold on a second, these people don't think Jesus is the Son of God. These people think Prophet Muhammad is the best man of all time, whereas I had grown up to believe that Jesus was like God incarnate, God walking on earth. And that admiration and love I had for Jesus came from like a genuine place in my heart. Growing up Catholic, any Catholics out there would understand that. Literally in school, they would make us not make us, we would cry every Easter over the crucifixion. We would do passion plays. And I would say the love and admiration Catholics have for Jesus, for Mother Mary, for the saints, wow, it's powerful. Kind of held me back, and I was like, no, I can't abandon Jesus, but Islam is looking really good. And then they would teach me about things like, the Quran has been perfectly preserved. And I was actually learning about this on my studies. Like, I was learning so much about Islam. Once again, those classic arguments that the Dawah people put forward. The Quran is perfectly preserved in comparison with the Bible, which is just, in their opinion, is just a mumbo jumbo. Nobody knows what's real, nobody knows what's not. And these kind of things, before you've really done a deep dive inquiry into it, seem quite logical. So not only that powerful emotional thing was going on in me, now the logical side, or so-called logical, was starting to play on my mind as well. Like, maybe they're right. Maybe this is the verbatim word of Allah, of God. Maybe this is true. Maybe this is God's actual speech via Angel Gabriel to Prophet Muhammad. And then it was, it's never been changed. And now I understand how that's not actually an argument for something being divine, but back then it kind of started making sense to me. And then there were just things like the kind of, that when you're a woman and they tell you that, like, um, Prophet Muhammad said that, heaven is under your mother's feet. Women are so venerated. There's a whole chapter in the Quran called Mary, which, as I said, being a Catholic, they know how to hook you in. Mentioning Mother Mary, that's gonna hook you in. Um, and all of these little things. And looking back, it was like breadcrumbing. Like they kind of give you these little bits, and they know the selling point, to reel you in. But then obviously it's not. There's always that kind of Islam sprinkled over it. Like they'll always attribute all these lovely things back to Islam. So anyway, fast forward, I went away with my class. We went to Turkey, Istanbul, for a couple of days, because we were learning about. Actually, I don't know why, but anyway, we went to Istanbul and we visited like all of the wonderful buildings there. It was actually a fantastic trip. It was amazing, and once again, well, what we were being told was this is wonderful because you guessed it, Islam. And I came back from that trip. I mean, I think Istanbul's a really lovely city. I was actually shocked because it was quite modern actually. The European side where we were staying was actually pretty modern, but it had that just it's just a wonderful place to go. And I came back and I was just like, you know what, this to me is just wonderful. Like I love it. But I wasn't ready really because I knew I was going to university, so I kind of wanted to enjoy university. So I looked into other things and I came to the conclusion that I was an atheist because I couldn't decide between Islam and Christianity. And the more I looked into it, I kind of just saw that, like, the more I researched religion, I started seeing holes in the logic of believing in a God. So I just left religion altogether. And I spent the years of my university, yeah, pretty much just having a great time. I moved abroad, came back, and I had a wonderful time. I worked while I was abroad, and then I came back because I had to for my university. So I should really explain that I have issues with all my trauma from my childhood and everything. For so long, I was just like on go, so that I didn't think about it. And when I came back to the UK, I had a complete like just breakdown, and I just was in a really bad place. I was very lonely at that point, and I couldn't go back to my family home for many reasons, and I was just desperate for a sense of family, a sense of belonging, and I started just going on dating apps to try and find someone. Very common thing to do when you have unresolved trauma. I ended up meeting someone, and this person happened to be Muslim, from a Muslim background. They told me that Islam was the answer to all of my problems. Everybody kept telling me it's because of the West why I had all these issues. And I decided, you know what, I'm gonna go for it because I had worked so hard to like study and live the life I wanted to live. And I didn't realize at the time it was because of my mental health that I had the issues I had, and my childhood trauma and just things out of my control, that I was kind of unlucky in that way, I guess, that it all just got too much, and I really just needed time to work through what I was going through, but I didn't know that at the time. Just him, lots of people were saying to me, the reason you feel this way is because of the West. Like the West is a broken place and Islam is perfect, and we don't have these issues in Islam. And all I could think of was those days when I kind of felt appreciated, wanted, the kindest people I'd ever met, the wonderful holiday in Turkey and everything. And I just thought, you know what? Maybe they're right. And I was desperate. So I just said, okay, maybe this is from God because I feel so at home with these people with the beliefs, everything. So yeah, I just decided to give it a go. And at first, you get this kind of rush of acceptance, and you just feel like, wow, like I've never felt so admired before. Everybody would just be congratulating me when I converted. Like they would be saying, wow, like you've made the right decision. And I really just felt appreciated for the first time. So, so like just now I finally had a family. Now I finally had people to call my own. And very quickly, that all fell apart because the same community that welcomed me with open arms then decided to start judging me like crazy. And I think when you convert to Islam, you convert for all the reasons I described. You know, you feel like, okay, this religion is perfect, it's perfectly preserved, all these things you're taught. But then when you start actually living the life, you realize that, oh, you know, this is not what I was kind of sold. This is so much different to what I thought it would be. And I mean, my life actually got even worse at this point. So I ended up kind of just blaming myself. And I was like, but if the religion is perfect, then it must be me. And I was just doing things on a surface level. I wasn't actually looking into the religion. I was just saying, it's me. It must be me. This religion is perfect. It's me. And very soon people started saying stuff to me like, you should be wearing the hijab, you should dress modestly, you shouldn't be talking to those men. And I just started to get really judged. And I felt like I just couldn't do the things I used to enjoy. But then I'd say, well, I need to get closer to God because that's obviously the shaitan. That's the devil whispering to me. So I did just that. I tried my hardest to get closer and research, but the closer I got and the more research I did, I started to uncover some really horrible things. Maybe I should go back a little bit. There was always one thing that never sat right with me about Islam, and that was their kind of bad attitude towards dogs. Like, obviously, you can't keep a dog in the house in Islam because of the hadith that says wherever there's a dog in the house, angels will not come in. So that really used to kind of irk me because I'd always grown up having dogs. I love dogs. My dad had a chocolate Labrador, and she was just she really, really, helped me during that depressive stage I was talking about earlier. She was literally the only thing that would get me up and out the door every day, like taking her for walks and stuff. So it really never sat right with me, but I guess I kind of, as all things, I did cognitive dissonance and just convinced myself somehow that no, 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 there must be a logic behind it. And then I'd always say, well, at least you can keep a cat, but that's a different story. But at some point, I guess I got brave enough to kind of sit there and say, hold on, let me actually look into this. Because sometimes when you're like, I don't know, when your mind is telling you something isn't right, it's usually because it's something is wrong. I kind of just got brave enough to ask myself, like, is this actually true that, like, dogs are some sort of bad thing that prevents angels from coming in? And I found myself kind of going down this rabbit hole of researching it and seeing that this was, I guess, a sound hadith, and it was the genuine consensus that dogs cannot live in the house. So something happened in me, which was like I had two conflicting beliefs, and I couldn't hold both of them at the same time in my mind. So on one hand, I had this life experience knowing that dogs are life changing, like they actually make people's lives better in so many ways, and they have helped human evolution. They were the first domesticated animals. So that was something I actually knew to be true. I had experience of that. And then on the other hand, I had the kind of so-called verbatim word of God and the example of the best man ever telling me that these animals were not to come in the house because they prevent angels from coming in. And at this point, I guess I had to give up one belief set. And if I gave up that belief about dogs, and there were many things like this is just one example. But if I gave up that belief on dogs, it was almost like I was lying to myself and I was deluding myself, like gaslighting myself. And I thought, you know what? I can't. So I was like, either one of these are not true. And I had, as I said, I had many problems like this. When I found out about the marriage to Aisha, who was a child, once again, there's no way you can justify it. So once again, if you say like, well, this example, is wrong, the whole thing falls apart. Obviously, I had no one to talk to about this in real life. I had no one to ask all these questions to, all these doubts I was having. So I went onto YouTube. I went to the internet, shake Google, and I decided to type in, did Prophet Muhammad really marry a 6-year-old child? And that's how I discovered the ex-Muslim community and figures who were so vocal and outspoken about these same doubts I had, but they had the answers and they had the proof. And then I started discovering even more stuff that the Prophet had done in his lifetime. And I just started to that profile of the perfect man really started to fall apart. Um, and yeah, there were just so many things. Slavery, the hatred towards polytheists and the hatred towards the LGBTQ community, the racism, the supremacy. And some people would say, you can't leave, these are all moral arguments and morality is objective. But actually, I was like, hold on, morality is important. Trying to be the best person you can is important because it reduces suffering for other people. And if you're someone like myself who's been through a lot of suffering in ways, especially when I was a child, I know that it's so important to have that morality. And if God was loving and kind, he would not encourage those things. He wouldn't make those things divine and sanctify them. And I just very quickly, as I said, everything started to unravel. Everything just fell apart for me. And before I knew it, I said to myself, I just don't think I believe in this anymore. I just can't hold on to this. And I think being a convert, there's a natural privilege that we don't have. Well, most of us, I'd assume, we don't tend to have that huge family behind us that's trying to keep us in the faith. But I kind of just quietly left the room and I just decided to not tell anyone, like in my in-laws and stuff, because I was like, no, I don't want to cause trouble for myself, because I knew how passionate these people were about the faith. And I'd say as well, so many other reasons for me leaving were down to, I guess, the way I was treated, because people were being racist to me because I'm white. They were literally, oh, because I look white. I got sick and tired as well of hearing people say that like Western women are basically immoral and they wear basically no clothes and we're so wonderful because we're modest. And it really started to offend me at some point because I was like, but hold on, I grew up in this culture. Like my family dressed like that, my friends dressed like that, and I don't think they're any worse than me or you. But there was just such this supremacist attitude that really started to put me off. I guess I always say Islam has a very good PR, has very good marketing and it's very good at drawing people in and it's very good at making a case for itself. But when you live the reality, it's a different story. And when you find out more than just the surface, fluffy stuff, it's something you just if you're, it's something it's very hard to cling on to. And I also want to caveat that and say that I still believe lots of Muslims who I meet are wonderful people, great people. I know them still, and I wouldn't say a bad word about them. And I really don't think they know their religion as well as like the critics of Islam. I really think they are on that surface level. And I think they're taught to not follow their doubts from a very young age. So that stops them from that further inquiry. And that's why the internet has literally just changed the game because now things that people didn't know about, and I generally don't think people do, now these things are becoming more common to know about and just so easy to access and research, all the negative things. Um, and I actually think that's a healthy thing because people should be able to make informed decisions about huge choices like joining a religion or continuing to be religious. But I think we should be allowed to speak about why we disagree with certain religions and historical figures. We should definitely be allowed to discuss that. Just because people hold someone in admiration in high, high regard, it doesn't mean they're off limits for discussion, especially if the things they did are considered to be like the worst of the worst in our society and in our culture. And that's where I'm kind of at now. I do share my story whenever it's safe to, like in real life. I would never encourage anyone to like because it's actually dangerous. That's the thing. It's dangerous to speak out about these things in so many places in the world. But wherever you're safe and able to do so, I think the discussion should definitely continue and actually should go to even a more public place because we need to be able to criticize like any religion, any ideology, and share our experiences, whatever those experiences might be. And that's just my little rant. But yeah, over time, you know, I ended up just leaving the whole thing, um, even leaving the relationship, just everything, because I realized that the lie that had been sold to me that Islam is a quick fix for all your problems was not true. And it was also not true that the West was to blame for my life. It's a multifaceted reason why things go wrong. And through leaving Islam, I was actually forced to do the work on myself and to go inside and try to introspect rather than try and make it about something else. And yeah, so that was my journey. This is a very quick summary of it, but that was my journey in and out of the religion. And I guess a quick summary as well of as why I don't believe in it and what caused me to stop believing in the belief system. I hope this was informative. This was just a very brief reason about why someone like me, what drew me to Islam, but what also caused me to leave. And if you watched, thank you so much for watching. And I wish everyone the best.